So it has taken 3 months, but I have at long last found a book that rivals The God of Small Things as my favourite, most brilliant book of 2024 so far. What book is that, you might ask? It is Homegoing by Gyasi. Oh my goodness, this book. We have a lot to talk about. It amazes me that a book that is so modern, the debut novel of a writer who is so young, manages to set the benchmark for so many different things. Like, if you need a precedent for historical fiction, this is it. Black history, this is it. Intergenerational fiction, this is it. Like, it's phenomenal. It's so rare for me to finish a book and say, oh, I wish there was more of this. You know, like, oh, 300 pages, that's not enough for me. I need more. Usually I'm like, oh, okay, I'm glad this ended when it did, or wow, that really dragged on. But no, this could have doubled it. Could have easily doubled it. I wanted it to go right into the 21st century, which is so crazy to think when it already covers 200 years of history. It goes through so many generations of this family, and I still wasn't done with it. I was like, no, I want more. I need more. And it never felt rushed, which was so strange to me, because we start and we're on the Gold Coast, we're in Ghana, we're between like the Asante tribes, the Fanti tribes. We've also got the British colonialists coming to take African people off to be slaves in the West Indies and in the Americas. And so we start in Africa, we go to America, we start in the South, there's plantation work, there's coal mine work. We then go up to Harlem, where there's sort of more like city jobs in New York. And it never feels rushed. Like, I actually think the later chapters feel so much more poignant and painful. Like, they really deliver the emotion and the sheer amount of pain in this book. Like, you will be overcome. Like, it's upsetting stuff, but also just like meaningful. Like, it's not trying to upset you for the sake of just like, you know, let's cut open some scars and see how much you bleed. Like, this is sad because it's poignant, and it's also making a very clever statement about time and history, how history is biased. You know, it's written by the victors, but time always has this cyclical nature. And I just love the ending, the way that it comes back to where it started. Just, yeah, it's... what a book. So we start off with two half-sisters, Effia and Essie, and it right from the get-go, it's amazing how it shows twists of fate, because one girl marries a white man and the other girl gets enslaved by that same white man's group. And that dramatically affects the turn of events that happens with each of their descendants, you know? Like, they both have their struggles, but the ebb and the flow, the way it changes, the way that they cross paths at the very end, like, it's crazy. Like, the amount of research that must have gone into writing something like this, it blows me away. Like, so much hard work. And I appreciate you, Gyasi. I appreciate you. The book is also so successful in how it gets into the minutiae of racism and how it changes based on where you are, because in Africa, it's much more direct. It's like, oh, there's a tangible difference. I can see you're a white person, you're a black person. When they get to America, it becomes more of an issue of colorism. And when they're in Harlem, there's the issue of passing and how some black people, they have, quote, like a little bit of white in them, and so they're able to assimilate into the more polite society, the more privileged areas, whereas people with darker skins, they have to settle for like the streets and the jazz and the dope addicts, and it's a completely different world, even though they're all right on top of each other in this same city. And what I liked as well is that it doesn't dwell on the past. So, for instance, we've got this whole family tree, and the book gradually goes through every single one of these people in like generations at a time. But it doesn't it's not too cumulative, you know. Each character has their own chapter and then boom, they're gone. They're mostly never heard from again. And what I like about that is while it's very brutal, cruel even, you could argue, it's very true to real life. You only have so many years in the spotlight and then bam, it's your children, it's your grandchildren, you become history. And then years later, even then you're forgotten because, you know, time doesn't wait for anyone. And so in that sense, the book just felt so true to real life. You know, it was history, but it was history being told by the people, for the people, and it didn't care about someone's feelings getting hurt because that was just the reality of it. There's 200 years. If you didn't get the chance to do something because of your identity, then that was, you know, that was life. I'm trying to think which chapter specifically I was the most upset by, which is hard because there were so many gut-punching ones. But I think it would have to go to Kojo. So he was the son of Ness and Sam, and they both worked in the plantations, and they didn't want their son to suffer the way that they had. So he went on like the Underground Railroad up to like the north where slavery was no longer being practiced because this is like Civil War sort of era. But then Kojo, as he gets older, he sets up this family for himself. He's got a job working on the boats. He's got all of these kids. And then the South, the Confederacy passes this new law where if you don't have the paperwork to, you know, prove that you're not a runaway slave, they can just abduct you and take you back to your slave master. And so even though Kojo's wife was born a free woman in the North, she still gets abducted, even when she is heavily pregnant, and Kojo is just this single dad now with like 5-6 other kids, desperately looking around for his heavily pregnant wife, knowing that he's probably never going to find her again. And that is tough. That is next level emotional, horrifying. I was sitting on my Avanti West Coast train from Glasgow to London reading this, like trying not to burst into tears, like, oh. But, you know, meaningful, impactful, not just emotion for the sake of emotion, tapping into a real historical problem that affected so many families and had a dramatic transformation on how things happened. Because then Kojo's son H, then because he's back in the South, he works in the mines, he gets very sick, but then he makes a decision to leave. Is it Alabama or is it Mississippi? It's one of the two. They leave and they go up to like Harlem, and that's when we get like all of the Harlem Renaissance stuff. Like the book, 200 years of history. It's like the 1770s to like the 1970s, and everything manages to be fit in. I would have still liked it to have been longer just so that we could get even more, but I never felt like, oh, that was a bit slapdash. You know, there was so much care, and that more than anything is what's missing from modern writing. To show, for the author to be able to show, like, I really care about this subject. And sure, in this particular case, there's personal engagement here because the author is like a Black African American individual. But still, not enough authors these days, they show that they really care about what they're talking about. It can often feel very detached from everything else. And so I really, really respected that. So what I would say is, if you want a masterclass in storytelling, which feels ultra modern while at the same time reflective on hundreds of years worth of Black history, give Homegoing a try. I can't say I'm surprised because I knew this book was going to be great, but I guess I am still surprised because I didn't think it would be this great. Like, this is my number one book of 2024 so far. And, I mean, pray for the next few books because I don't know how they're going to top this. How are they going to top this? Transcendent Kingdom is automatically on my TBR. How could it not be? Phenomenal.